How to configure the camera. Note on configuring your camera. How to set the ISO level, autofocus, and shutter modes will vary by camera brand and even the specific camera model. You have to read the instructions for your camera. Basic configurations: exposure modes, autofocus, shutter modes, and ISO levels. Exposure modes. We have Scene, Auto, and PSAM. PSAM stands for Program, Shutter Priority, Aperture Priority, and Manual. On the Canon cameras, shutter priority is indicated as TV instead of an S. Aperture priority is indicated as AV instead of A. Exposure modes: Sport Scene. Easy to use but has limitations. Sport Scene mode varies by camera brand and model. It is fine for outdoor daytime sports, but none work in low light. You cannot use it at night or in the gym. This is the major limitation that I have with Sport Scene. Sport Scene also uses zone focusing with closest subject focus logic. What that means is it cannot track a specific subject. You cannot focus on a specific subject. This is the second major limitation that I have with Sport Scenes. Exposure modes: Auto and Program. As shown on the picture on the top right, Auto, focus is zone closest subject, just like in the Scene mode. Flash, auto fires. Whether you want it or not, the camera controls the flash. I do not recommend using auto. Instead, I recommend using P, Program. Focus, it allows you to select what to focus on. And for the flash, you select to use or not use the flash. So this is what I use instead of auto. Exposure modes: Shutter and Aperture Priority. As shown in the picture on the top right, it is the S and the A. Shutter Priority: you select the shutter speed to use. The camera selects the aperture to use. This is best used when you want to use a specific shutter speed, usually when you want to control either the highest or the lowest speed. Aperture Priority: you select the aperture to use. The camera selects the shutter speed to use. Best when you want to use a specific aperture, like wide open for night games when you want the maximum amount of light through the lens. Exposure modes manual. You have full control over the shutter speed and aperture used. Best used when the lighting conditions are difficult for the camera to correctly meter. Picture bottom left. The camera is looking at the aluminum bleachers and says, "Whoa, too bright," and it darkens the picture. Picture on the right. The camera looks at the black background and the dark purple curtains and says, "Whoa, too dark," and it starts to increase the exposure, so you get overexposed people. Autofocus. In autofocus, you have two things you have to look at: focus modes and area modes. Focus modes AFS, AFC, area modes single point, area or zone, dynamic, and tracking. Focus modes AFS, S for single shot. Canon calls it one shot. The camera will not fire until the lens is focused. AFC is continuous, C for continuous. Canon calls it AI servo. The camera will focus continuously as you are shooting. The camera will fire even if the lens is not in focus. Area modes. Each mode has pros and cons. Single point. There is one focus point. You have to put and hold it on the subject. Zone area. The camera picks what to focus in the zone. Usually, closest subject is used. Dynamic, which is what Nikon uses, you put the AF point on the subject, the camera tracks the subject within the zone. Autofocus area modes, Canon T7i. These are the 4 AF modes, area modes that the Canon uses. Top, single point, just one of its focus points. Second one, it's a zone AF with a 3x3 matrix. Third, Canon calls it a large zone. It has a 3x5 matrix. 3 AF points horizontal, 5 AF points vertical. Auto selection is everything, all the autofocus points that the Canon has. Nikon D5600. They call it slightly different, and it works slightly different. Actually, it works a lot different. Top, single point, same thing as Canon, one focus point. You can select it. Second one, Nikon calls it Dynamic 9. It's a 3x3 matrix, so 3x3, similar to the Canon. But, here's the but. You have to put the center point on the subject. The camera will not search in there for the subject. You have to start it on the subject, and the camera will try to follow it afterwards. Dynamic 21, just like Dynamic 9, just a bigger matrix. It's a 5x5 matrix. Dynamic 39, again, like D9 and D21, except it uses the entire focus area in the black outline. Continuing, tracking. Camera tracks the subject. Problem, not all cameras have tracking. Tracking ability ranges from good all the way down to poor. Tracking a subject in a group of people, like at a football or basketball game, is a lot harder than tracking a single lone subject. As of 2022 summer, Sony is the leader in tracking. Face detect. The camera focuses on the faces. Problem. When you have more than one face in the frame, which faces will the camera focus on? Can you force the camera to focus on certain faces or not? This is the reason why I do not use face detect. The camera is often picking faces that I do not want in focus. Eye detect. Camera focuses on the eyes. Just like face detect, when you have multiple people in the frame, whose eyes will the camera focus on? It's probably best when you're taking a portrait, when you have just one person in the frame. Autofocus single point. For school purposes, shooting many sports and events, single point is generally the best compromise. Put the single AF point into the center of the screen, and you put the AF point onto your subject. You have to know how to recognize where the AF point is. You also have to know how to move the AF point. The problem is the AF point can and will get accidentally moved. Shutter. Shutter modes, single shot. You press the shutter and the camera fires one shot. Good for things like presentations, student life, and activities in the theater. You just want one shot. Continuous. You press and hold the shutter down. The camera will keep firing until you release the shutter. Use this for most sports. Use continuous high, often on the camera as CH, to shoot at the fastest speed your camera can. However, if your camera can shoot faster than 10 frames per second, it is a balance of shots versus number of shots to sort through. If you shoot at a high frame rate, for instance, 18 frames a second, you can easily end up shooting over 3,000 frames at a game, and you really don't want to be sorting through 3,000 frames. I shoot at continuous low on my mirrorless camera for that specific reason. I shot once at high, and with 3,000 frames, I did not want to have to go through that again. Caution! On some cameras, when the shutter is set to continuous high, the autofocus will only focus on the first shot and not focus for the rest of the burst. What that means is if you have someone running towards you, the camera will focus for the first shot, and everything that after that will be out of focus as that person is running towards you. Read the manual for your camera to see how continuous high is handled. Electronic shutter on mirrorless point-and-shoots and cell phones. Some mirrorless cameras have an electronic shutter. The E-shutter on some of these cameras is silent. This is great for concerts and golf where you want the camera to be quiet. However, some cameras generate a shutter clicking noise that you cannot turn off. The E-shutter allows some of the cameras to shoot at a faster frame rate than with the mechanical shutter. For instance, a camera may shoot with the mechanical shutter up to 10 frames a second, and with the E-shutter, it may go up to 30 frames a second. However, there is no free lunch. At a high frame rate, you will have a lot of pictures to sort and edit. Some cameras also have limitations on the E-shutter. For instance, it may have a maximum ISO limit. It may have other limitations on the E-shutter. ISO level. ISO level is the sensitivity of the camera to light. Larger number means it is more sensitive to light. For instance, so you can shoot it at night games or in the gym. If you have a lower number, your camera may not be sensitive enough to shoot night games or gym games. Specify. You can select the ISO level based on the amount of light and how sensitive you want the camera to be. Auto. The camera will select the ISO level. So in this sense, it works just like the other auto exposure functions in the camera. Again, note on setting the ISO level, autofocus, and shutter modes. How to set the ISO level, autofocus, and shutter modes will vary by camera brand and the specific camera model. So you have to read the instructions for your camera. The end. Thank you.